How is this still going on? This verse been going for way too long. If you ain't blind, you can see that this is wrong. And I won't comply. Not me, no way. Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Paid time off for the Queen's funeral. In some places, federally, yes, there is a paid holiday federally for the Queen's death. In BC, they're having a full provincial holiday. In Ontario, not so much. I've got the ones I've collected. I'll show them all to you. So it's kind of different around the country how the provinces are responding. But if you're a federal employee, you get the day off paid. Very interesting. Inflation. How do we get some more of that? Inflation, right? Says Justin Trudeau. He's finished his 8-ball of inflation and he wants more, right? And so he's handing out a GST rebate. And we've got Pierre Poilievre telling Canadians how bad of an idea that actually is and how it will fuel inflation, and Scotiabank and Bank of Montreal and a bunch of other banks as well. But that doesn't matter. Justin Trudeau wants his inflation, so he's going after it. David Akin interrupted Pierre Poilievre while he was trying to make remarks. I've got video of that to show you. Really, Akin makes a fool of himself. He takes his credibility and he puts it up in flames. It's unbelievable. He does, don't you know who I am? I'm the Global News Political Bureau Chief. Right. Lucki Phonecall. Remember the RCMP had that phone call where Brenda Lucki said explicitly, you don't understand. This is going to be used to ram through liberal gun crime or gun laws that are really important. That phone call, deleted. Sorry. Brenda Lucki's the commissioner of the RCMP, and she said, we want that phone call deleted, so they deleted it. I don't actually know if that's how the phone call got deleted, but it doesn't really matter how the phone call got deleted. It is deleted, so now we can't watch it and judge for ourselves. You're welcome, right? They're here to keep you safe, comrade. There's so much to get to. Let's get to it. First, if you want to support the show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. You can check out the forums. They're free. You can do a one-time payment or a monthly subscription. You can check out my book, or you can check out the merch if you're interested in that. You can sign up for Kitchen Table Talks, which I believe will be on Sunday, 1 o'clock. I think that's when we'll start, and I'll be sending out the email for that. So sign up here if you're interested in joining the panel, just stepping in for a listen or whatever you'd like to do. I'd love to see you. It's been a little while. And you can click on here if you want to support the show, but you don't actually want to send me any money directly. That's if you shop at Amazon. You can also check out Locals and Canada Report for all of the links, etc., that I use before I build the show. All right, let's get into what happened. If you have not heard about Interruption Gate, Dave Akin Gate, Global News is the enemy gate. Here is what happened. Anthony Koch says, at a press conference today on combating Justin Trudeau's inflation, Dave Akin told me to tell Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre to go F himself. Later, he erupted in a yelling spasm to try and prevent Mr. Poilievre from even beginning his press conference. Here is video of this incident. It's unbelievable. You can hear Akin in the background. I've got everything maxed. I don't know if you can hear it better if you go listen to the actual source. I've got a YouTube video of the full thing as well. I don't know if it's louder. I don't think it is. It's all the same. It shows the same bars on my sound thing, but whatever. Here's what happened. There's decorum when the leader of the official opposition is speaking. Typically, that's treated as something you should be respectful. Akin would know that. Kean says, if I had done this, I would have been manhandled out of the parliamentary press secretary or parliamentary press box by the security, and I probably wouldn't be allowed back. I don't think he's wrong. So here's what happened. And you judge for yourself if you think that this is offside from Global News. And this was not Dave Akin losing his cool. This was not, I'm so angry, I'm just going to erupt here. This was calculated, planned. Somebody asked him or told him to do this. I don't think that this guy's been covering politics since 1993. I don't think there's one other example of him doing this. And that's not Pierre Poilievre's fault. This is calculated and coordinated. Think of Global News TikTok edition. They're getting clicks. And so they do this nonsense. This was on purpose. Here we go.
Merci beaucoup d'être revenu aujourd'hui. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate your presence here today. Before I begin, let me just say that thank you very much. I'm being heckled here by thank you very much for your congratulation. Thank you very much for your questions. I'm going to begin my remarks now.
But will you take some questions after?
Justin Trudeau is out of touch, and Canadians are out of money. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. $500 billion of inflationary deficits have bid up the cost of the goods we buy and the interest that Canadians pay. And that is why we are experiencing 40-year highs in inflation today. Here we are today with 40-year highs in inflation, where Canadians are spending more just to feed themselves, to heat their homes, and to buy a home in the very first place. The reason that, So I mean, we have basically a liberal heckler who snuck in here today to, well, apparently, right. Are you going to let me make my statement?
From the guy who actually reported first on the Prime Minister breaking the law.
Yeah. Are you going to let me make my statement?
Ask a question. Say yes.
I've actually never seen you heckling the Prime Minister.
Ask Minister
Never seen you
Baird
heckling the Prime Minister. Look, bottom line is this.
I'm going to take some questions at the end of the stage.
Yes, I will taking 2 questions at the very end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to start my statement again, and hopefully this time without interruption from the Liberal heckling gathering here, and we'll speak.
So that was not an accident or a mistake. It was a provocation. They wanted Mr. Poilievre to get angry, to get hot under the collar, to snap out, to kick him out, to say, get this guy out of here, whatever it is. However he reacted, they were going to make political hay out of. Do you know how I know? They tried to make political hay out of that and say that what Pierre Poilievre had done was dangerous. Amber says, week 1, the media is the enemy. This is a dangerous path, says Amber, specifically naming a member of the media as the enemy in your email to thousands of supporters. It's pure intimidation by someone who interrupts for a living. I worry about my journalist friends in the line of fire. Interesting. So they're saying that if a journalist interrupts the leader of the opposition calling him a liberal heckler and then calling out the journalist for acting inappropriately, acting without decorum where decorum is demanded. Sorry, it is, and everybody knows it. That's the dangerous part. Remember the liberal TikTok edition, global news, garbage news, liberal TikTok, global news TikTok edition, trying to make hay out of people attacking her on Twitter after she muses about how racist Alberta as a province is, right? After she hits the bee's nest or wasp nest or hornet's nest, whichever yellow jacket you want to hit, and incites this kind of vitriol, after she muses about how much better she is than other people, then she gets upset and plays victim when they respond to her attack. That's the MO, and that's exactly what they're trying to do here. Here's Mr. Poilievre's email that Amber is responding to, and he says, you won't believe this. I couldn't believe it, and it happened to me. Today, I was delivering a statement about how Trudeau's inflation is hurting everyday Canadians when someone started shouting. First, they hurled obscenities and started shouting at me. Was it someone left-wing protester? Maybe it was a Liberal MP or staffer. No, it was a member of the media. That's right. David Akin from Global News was swearing, shouting, and heckling. He wasn't interested in hearing what I had to say, and he certainly wasn't interested in reporting it in an unbiased way. David Akin identified himself. He said, do you know who I am? I'm David Akin. I'm a Global News man, a bureau chief, politics bureau chief. Oh, awesome, dude. You should know better than. Holy cow, you're acting like a crazy person. And they're trying to play victim. I can't believe Mr. Poilievre would call him a liberal, blah, blah, blah. I can't believe he'd include his name. Yeah, it's in the video. Akin was yelling it out. Akin was swearing at the leader of the opposition. That's weird. That's newsworthy. Global News. Amber, right? Global News was swearing, shouting, and heckling. He wasn't interested in blah, blah, blah. This is what we're up against. It's not just the Liberals with all of the advantages and resources of the federal government at their disposal. It's the media who are no longer interested in even pretending to be unbiased. They want us to lose. But we have a secret weapon. You and hundreds of thousands. Okay, so that's the part where it turns into fundraising. Somebody said, I'm so mad that Mr. Poilievre is trying to fundraise off the back of this. I was like, dude, that's what politicians do. If there's a media piece, politicians don't understand how to make content. Politicians most politicians couldn't sit here and do this, I don't think, not every day, certainly. And they'd get themselves in hot water because they'd say something that their supporters would be upset about, right? I think politicians should have to. But anyway, they can't figure out what to talk about is usually the problem. They'll just talk about nonsense and nobody will watch, and they'll feel stupid talking about nothing that nobody watches, and so they stop doing it, right? But they don't know what to talk about. So when something like this happens, they use that for fundraising because it's in the public zeitgeist. People know about this happening. These guys are trying to make political hay out of this happening. So why not fundraise off this? Amber's trying to fundraise off this, and she's saying, or not fundraise, trying to make political hay, saying we're the victims, and she's mad that Poilievre's fundraising. That's what politicians do. That's the whole job. Spend money on me so I can represent your interests. That's the job. And people being upset with them fundraising. Understand the job, please. Holy smoke. It's crazy. Of course they're going to fundraise. That's the whole thing. They have to be popular enough for people to trust them to spend money on them. And that money that they're not going to get back, right? Like, hopefully they get it back in, it's like a weird bribe. I'm going to spend money on you so that you represent my interests at the government level. But that's the agreement of democracy, right? Anyway, Keen says, if I had done what David Akin did, parliamentary police would have thrown me off the property. Double standard and amends must be made. David Akin knows better, should have known better, and it was not an accident. And amends? He's not going to make amends. He's going to blame Pierre Poilievre. They're going to angle for an apology from him. Malcolm Twizzle says, if we ever have a reason to mistrust the media, especially global news, this episode was it. But don't think it was accidental. Malcolm says this. It was planned and calculated by global news. Another reflection of how shallow and self-serving the media are. This is not about news. It's about ratings. I think 100%. They saw Global News TikTok edition get very popular very quickly. And they thought, why can't David Akin do that? It's because he can't sit in a very low cut shirt and have a booster shot profile picture. That's why nobody's gonna join for that. David Akin is responding after he torched his own credibility, after taking that career that he started in 1993. Andy Lee's the one who said that he started in 1993, and just up in flames, right? Credibility gone, right? I'm sure the liberal media will ignore this decorum oversight. I'm sure that there are liberal people who look at him and don't think that he's lost credibility. But the fact is, it's just like Marco Mendocino, who's a liar, right? Liar in the House of Commons. There's no coming back from that. Sorry, man. Torched, right? Your credibility is gone. Did he have any to begin with? Global News? Not much. But what was left of it? Gone. David Akin says, trying to, I don't know, blow out the tatters of the flaming napkin. Lots of readers and viewers called me about today's Parliament Hill presser. Many said I was rude and disrespectful to Pierre Poilievre. I agree. I'm sorry for that. We all want politicians to answer questions, but there are better ways of making that point. Yeah, there are, David. And you knew that before you did all of what you did. So you made the bet and all that. Tristan says, remember, even if this is satire, I just want to make sure you understand he's being funny here. He's a National Post columnist. I believe he's being funny here. I laughed. He says, even if Poilievre isn't saying racist things, he could be communicating racist messages via his blinking. I've also played one of his speeches backwards, and it said, I'm love milk, a clear white supremacist dog whistle. Right. Exactly. Exactly. I thought it was funny. I can't say this person's name. This person on Twitter is responding to Tom on Twitter, who says, Pierre Poilievre showed his true colors today, attacking a reporter. Time will be his enemy, despite the efforts of the CPC party. Okay, so the CPC party is their asset, and they're trying to retain that, but they want desperately to get rid of Poilievre, and they don't want him to talk about anything. And this is the victimhood, taking the victimhood from attacking a reporter. Is that what happened? Do you think the reporter? Do you think that the reporter had some kind of responsibility for that whole interaction? I think that Akin was trying to take control of the press, the presser, and over top of the leader of the opposition. And that's not appropriate. The decorum is totally blown out of the water. Usually when people posture the way David Akin is posturing, they're too green and don't know better, and somebody will take them off to the side and say, dude, you're doing like lifestyle stories for the next 6 months. You're not getting to the parliamentary press gallery again after making such a big fool of yourself. right? You don't do that to the leader of the opposition on his first day, right? And I mean, whether you like the leader of the opposition or not, that is absolutely offside, to borrow a term from sports. And so this guy says, a perfect example of a tweet coming across my feed with someone me or my followers don't interact with. Yeah, Twitter's a total mess. Twitter is an absolute mess, but it's part of the media machine in Canada. And if you like Mr. Poilievre, or you have a feed that doesn't include these criticisms of Mr. Poilievre, I promise you that Twitter's inserting them. I've seen them, and I don't follow. There aren't a lot of people who are retweeting this attack line, and I'm glad that I'm being exposed to it. It's an interesting thought experiment, but I think it's really being handled clumsily. I don't think it's convincing. Maxime Bernier says, the Liberals and the NDP are trying to portray Pierre Poilievre as a racist and a white supremacist. Everyone knows he is not. This is despicable. As despicable as his party paying a professional mudslinger to smear me and the PPC candidates as racist and white supremacist. It worked so well. It is still impacting the party today. And that's unfortunate, but it's exactly what happened. Now, I think the CPC has a bit more history, and people will not be as willing to go along with the messaging, but they are still trying to create a Pavlovian response. Pavlov's dogs were the ones who, when they rang a bell, they fed them, and then so they'd start salivating, and then they started ringing the bell without feeding them, and they noticed that they continued salivating. That Pavlovian response, when we say orange man, you say bad, right? That kind of response with Pierre Poilievre. That's what they're trying to do, because they got that with Bernier, right? They got that with PPC. And it didn't take much. It really didn't. And all it takes is a couple of bots on Twitter and getting in front of enough people to get that mass mass exposure. There's a word, I can't remember. But to start really influencing people in a way that is very damaging and has been damaging to the PPC, really. But good for Bernier for speaking out and comparing the two. And I think, I hope that he continues down this path rather than down the path of comparing what's happening, because they're going to use the same tactics against the Conservative Party of Canada that they successfully used against the PPC, and they successfully used against Faith Goldie, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not going to be as effective because more people are not going to believe it. As many people aren't going to believe it because they have their own preconceptions about the CPC. The CPC occupies a certain space in Canadian politics, and somebody's saying, hey, they're racist all of a sudden. The people who support the CPC are going to dismiss that more readily than they would dismiss the, hey, those PPC are racist. You see the difference? I'm maybe not making it very plain, but there is a difference there. And here, I wanted to show you as well, Mr. Poilievre's leadership team in the House and in the government. So Poilievre is leader. Melissa Lanceman and Tim Uppal are co-deputy leaders. The whip is Carrie Lynn Finley, and I don't recognize her. The House leader is Andrew Scheer. That I thought was strange because he was a leader recently, like he was the leader of the party. Andrew Scheer puts out good polished videos. A lot of people think he's really funny. I can't get over the fact that he won the leadership over Bernier in that election. So his finger's in the pot, as far as I understand it. And it would be interesting. I'm interested why he's so prominent, right? That's something that makes me think, yeah, Greg's probably right. Everybody's saying the other thing. Yesterday, I put out a Speaking Moistly, and Greg and I did a Speaking Moistly yesterday. And it was great. We talked about Pierre Poilievre winning and me being wrong about Jean Charest, et cetera, et cetera. And he was saying, you're so naive, Mark. I'm not naive. I understand the risks. The perspective I try to put forward on my show is the perspective I think that most people who are conservative, most people who are reasonable center people who were traditional liberals in 1995, people who believe in free speech and personal accountability and responsibility. I'm trying to portray the average person who's bombarded with all this, who doesn't have the time to sit here and look at this like I do. There are some things that I think that most people believe that there's no real basis for them to believe what we're told to believe. But that doesn't come onto my show because I don't think that it would resonate. There are things that I believe about our government that are for me personally and not for the show, because the show is meant to be for a general audience, not for somebody who's who's in the weeds as much as I am, because I'm in the weeds and I look at things in a way that maybe people, it would take people a little bit of time to get up to speed on my perspective, but I think that I can defend it. But that's neither here nor there. I'm trying to look at this from a Monday morning quarterback kind of way. The person who looks at what's happened and goes, oh, I should really get involved in that. I'll listen tomorrow to find out what happens next type deal. That's the perspective of the show. And people who want to know more, or who are interested in, this is the person, this is their job, and this is the joke, because that's kind of the show. But in order to understand the joke, you have to understand the person and the job. So, and in order to be willing to engage in the joke, you can't be too in the weeds about the whole thing, because man, it's a little sad where we're at, right? So yeah, I'm not naive. I understand, but there are certain perspectives that don't play well to a general audience, and that's not what the show's about. So I'm hopeful, and I hope that Canada is going to do well, and I hope that we can avoid disaster. We've been able to avoid disaster in the past. We've been able to be successful in global conflicts and then have prosperous times afterwards. So I don't think that the whole humanity is lost and bring on the asteroid or anything to that effect. The proverbial asteroid, right? I think that there's a hope, and there's always hope, and I'm always going to look for the hope, and I'm always going to tell you, like, it looks like this guy's fighting for us, or it looks like he's not, right? And the rhetoric looks like Pierre Poilievre is fighting for us. Andrew Scheer being prominently displayed in his cabinet, maybe Greg's right. Maybe bring on the asteroid, proverbially. But I mean, nah, I don't believe in that. There's so much potential in continued life and continued conversation and continued struggling to a more perfect understanding of each other. And there's never a good time to give up, right? There's never a good time to give up. Even if it all looks bleak, man, you got to keep fighting, got to find a reason, right? And the reason can't be, I'm going to win tomorrow, maybe eventually. But the reason should be, I'm going to articulate the counterpoint to this as best I can. And I'm going to move forward in my life and worry about the things I can change, and be like water for the rest. Flow, right? We all heard through the campaign that Conservatives would leave the party if Pierre Poilievre became the leader, and one actually did. Here's Andrew Coyne, of course, reporting Quebec Conservative MP quits caucus over Pierre Poilievre leadership win. He was, fine. He's a liberal anyway, I guess. But we'll see. We'll see how this all plays out. Lou says, during a climate emergency and global pandemic this week, the Canadians paid for the Liberal cabinet to travel by air to British Columbia to meet in person. Then all 158 Liberal MPs flew to New Brunswick to meet in person, but Parliament is still not allowed to meet in person, and carbon taxes are going up. Very hypocritical, right? Very hypocritical. Stuff like that makes it very clear that the carbon taxes, which don't actually reduce CO2 or do anything for the environment that I've been materially able to suss out. You look at BC, they've had a carbon tax since 2008. What have they been able to accomplish for the environment that Canada as a whole has not been able to accomplish with that carbon tax? Nothing. Oh, what's the reduction in CO2 compared to Ontario for periods 2008 to 2020? Oh, Ontario has less emissions? Isn't that crazy? Holy smokeronies, and no tax. Weird, right? Strange. So now we're in a nightmare scenario where it doesn't matter what the outcomes are, and it doesn't matter that the carbon tax doesn't actually fight climate change. We're just paying more taxes because Canadians can afford it. That's not what I want. That's not what I want. I think that's terrible. CTV News has Mr. Poilievre's response to Justin Trudeau's plan to pay for or pour gasoline on the inflationary fire. This is what he was trying to say when Andrew Coyne kept interrupting him. Not Andrew Coyne, excuse me, Dave Akin. Apologies, Dave Akin. They're kind of interchangeable though, aren't they? CTV News says, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says Trudeau's government's new measures are spreading more gasoline on the inflationary fire. That's what he says. This is CTV News, and this is the video. It was a good ending. I'll play the beginning of the video. It's 4 minutes. There's probably 3 or 4 good clips, but we'll just do the beginning because it encapsulates most of what's going on here.
Living. The more Trudeau spends, the more things cost. $500 billion of inflationary deficits mean more dollars bidding up the cost of the things we buy and the interest we pay. On top of that, inflationary taxes have inflated the cost of businesses and workers to produce those very same goods. The more Trudeau spends, the more things cost. Now, this is not about an accounting ledger. It is about real pain for real people. With food prices up 10% year over year, 4 in 5 Canadians are forced to cut back on their diets. We have 30-year-olds living in their parents' basements or trapped in tiny apartments from which they cannot escape. We have seniors who watch their savings evaporate because the cost of heat and other essentials has risen out of reach. Now, I thought Justin Trudeau might have learned the lesson from the fact that I won the leadership. He suddenly took an interest in inflation. After 2 years of my warning him that his inflationary money printing deficits would cause this problem, he finally admitted that there is a problem. And he announced he would hold a press conference today, one day after I issued a challenge to him. And
we knew the challenge, no new taxes. People were saying, why not cut the current taxes? And I thought the same thing. It'd be much better to cut taxes than to hand out more checks for $500, but that's exactly the plan, despite a whole bunch of people saying, don't do this. Here's Sharon, and she says, Scotiabank says new cost of living spending announced by Prime Minister Trudeau on Tuesday is increasing the likelihood that the Bank of Canada will need to raise interest rates above 4%. Another $500 for everybody. That's enough money to continue to raise interest rates, eh? Nick is saying, taxpayer, how does one fight an inflation rate of 8%? Trudeau, well, we will borrow another $4.5 billion to give out to people so they can spend it to buy stuff. Taxpayers, but isn't that what caused inflation? Harper did it, says Trudeau. Not really, but kind of. Here is National Post breaking. Trudeau announces $4.5 billion inflation relief package for low earners. Communism in real time. Redistribution of wealth. Yay! Welcome to Canada, everyone. This is Brian Lilly covering the same thing. Trudeau's answer to inflation is more spending that won't help long term. For months, Justin Trudeau has been warned that his own government's spending is part of the problem with inflation. His response to the worsening situation Tuesday was more government spending. Yay! Trudeau announced 3 temporary measures on Tuesday to help ease the cost of living pressures many are facing. While they provide some relief in the short term, they'll be withdrawn within about 6 months, while also making the overall problem of inflation worse. So it's time to get rid of incompetence, I guess, right? Yeah. Andre says, is responding to the Globe and Mail, and they're reporting temporary boost to GST rebate appropriate amid high inflation, economists say. I'm sure they've got 2 economists there, and they're directly paid by the Liberal government to say that. Hold on, let me double check my script here. This is what the economists say today. No, this will not hurt inflation. Tomorrow they will say, inflation is transitory. And then Thursday, they'll say, temporary. Inflation is now temporary. And then by next Friday, they'll say, inflation's good for you, actually. It's good. See, you're losing weight, you're healthy, you're walking more. I'm not an expert, but my understanding of inflation is it's too much money chasing too few goods. How does injecting $4.5 billion into the economy help resolve that? Justin? It doesn't. It makes the problem worse. Dan says he lectures instead of listening. Since last week, 3 of the country's largest commercial lenders, CIBC, Bank of Montreal, and Bank of Nova Scotia, have released reports expressing concern over using revenue windfalls for additional spending. Yeah, it's concerning. Seamus O'Regan. I just included this because I think that the Auntie Ali is 100% right. Up to $467 this fall through the GST tax credit, $500 through the housing benefit, up to $1,300 to pay for your kids' dental care, and we're paying for it by taxing yachts, private jets, and luxury sports cars. Ali says, where can we read up on how many in each of these categories are sold in Canada? Because I highly doubt Canadians are buying enough private jets, yachts, and even luxury family use $100,000 price tag cars to cover $5 billion in spending. Yeah. Moving on, we'll talk about vaccines. CPAC is airing a question to Trudeau. The question is good. Trudeau's answer is slimy. And he says that the vaccine has saved millions and billions of lives. So I don't want to show you the Prime Minister lying. I feel like it's disingenuous to promote lies said by the Prime Minister. But I'll let you hear the question. Watch Chrystia Freeland's face. And I'm sure there's a little bit because the sun's in her eyes. Also, Like when the question is asked, watch how Chrystia Freeland reacts. It's just more of this, but it just makes me laugh. And this guy, Declue, this is the health minister. He looks like the eagle, the American eagle, the Muppet eagle. What's his name? I can't remember the guy's name. I'm gonna look it up. But let's listen to the question. And I'm not gonna let Trudeau speak, because yesterday I said I wasn't going to play Trudeau, and then I only played a little bit, and then I felt bad for it right away. So apologies about that. No Trudeau today, just the question. Here we go. Watch Freeland's face.
Yesterday in your speech to caucus, you said now is not the time for politicians to exploit fears and to pit people one against the other. Your critics have really jumped on that, saying that it's hypocritical on your part because some of your policies on vaccination and some of the language that you've used in recent months, and including during the election campaign, contributed to a lot of this divisiveness that we see as a society. So how do you respond to critics?
How do you respond? He responds through half-truths and faulty rhetoric. It's just ridiculous. This is interesting. Here is a Niagara survey that they were talking about discrimination. And within the survey, one of the top 5 reasons for discrimination was vaccine status. However, the people in charge in Niagara decided to remove that. So Sandor says a woman named Hill, I think it's a woman, is currently chair of the DEI advisory committee, but it was the Niagara Region DEI staff who made the decision to remove vaccine status discrimination from the top 5 of the key findings page. Hill defended the decision. The page has been edited. 24% of survey respondents said, by writing in the other category, that they experienced vaccination status discrimination. It ranked 4th in the survey data, but this was excluded from the top 5 key findings of the DEI 5-year plan document. So this is just further proof that anybody who is acting and has power like this to edit results of surveys, etc., has the power to just bury uncomfortable results that they don't want to deal with, that they don't want to have to contend with. And that's just wild. I don't know how to fight this other than to make explicit rules that fight against this. But if you've got somebody who's ideologically driven, there's already rules in place that prevent this kind of stuff. So how do you meaningfully push back against something that you didn't know happened because these people hit it? Further, the same is happening at the federal level, where talking about directions and directives about vaccine mandates are coming from the very top, but no names. That's interesting. Bob says Trudeau travel and the science. Court documents reveal the Trudeau Liberal mandates are not based in any science or supported by Health Canada. Here are the facts. And it's a Jordan Peterson Daily Wire thing. And he's citing court documents from his phone. So apologies, I don't have receipts to back this up, but I've read around and I just didn't connect it. So I just didn't connect the tweets with a link. I thought this one had a link, but I was wrong. So apologies, and I couldn't find it this morning. But anyway, I've seen the link and I will include it as soon as I find it again. Here's point 1. No one in the COVID recovery unit, including Jennifer Little, the Director General, had any formal education in epidemiology, medicine, or public health. Little, who has an undergraduate degree in literature from the University of Toronto, testified that there were 20 people in the unit. When Preslovis, that's the other lawyer, I guess, asked whether anyone in the unit had any professional experience in public health, she said there was one person, Monique St. Laurent. According to St. Laurent's LinkedIn profile, she appears to be a civil servant who briefly worked for it doesn't say. St. Laurent is not a doctor, Little said. Reached on the phone, St. Laurent confirmed that she was a member of the COVID recovery. She referred all other questions to government spokesperson. Little suggested that a senior official in the Prime Minister's cabinet, or possibly the Prime Minister himself, had ordered the COVID recovery to impose the travel mandate. During cross-examination, Little told Preslovas that repeatedly that discussions about the mandate had taken place at senior and very senior levels, but she refused to say who had given her team the order to impose the travel mandate. I'm not at liberty to discuss. And this is the link here. It says globalresearch.ca. And so apologies that I don't have the link directly to this article, but I will find it as soon as I can. It's very interesting that travel mandates can be ordered by the Prime Minister's office by committees that don't have any kind of real representation from experts, right? It's wild. It's absolutely wild. Holly Doan, talking about travel, moving on, says, we are facing the specter of an industry in deep crisis with many parts of it on the brink of collapse. Marsha Walden, CEO, says, execs at Tourism Commission paid themselves 5-figure quarantine bonuses, ATR records show. Pretty wild. Canadian tourism is being decimated by bad policies at the federal level and by inability to do anything about it at the provincial level. And how do you deal with that? If the industry collapses, is that just an opportunity for a new industry to grow out of it? I don't know. It seems unlikely. Growing a new industry requires a lot of capital, or growing a new, especially something like a hotel or something like that. You have to have money to purchase the hotel. You have to staff it. You have to understand that it might take a little bit of time before it's profitable. There's all sorts of barriers to starting something like a hotel chain, never mind a tourism industry. And so if we're at the point where things are looking really dicey and nobody does anything to fix it, it seems like that's the outcome that they wanted. They wanted the tourism industry to collapse in on itself, and then they can save it with digital ID and pretend money. Yay. Further, the vaccine mandate impacted and is still impacting Maxime Bernier, all these erroneous vaccine orders and non-crimes that are in court. CTV Saskatoon says People's Party of Canada leader Maxime Bernier returned to Saskatoon for a trial involving public health order violation tickets issued to more than 40 rally attendees. So he's out there and he's doing what he needs to do as the leader of the People's Party. I think that I don't know how I would do it better. Like, not me personally being leader, but if somebody said, you are the leader of this party, or even the People's Party, let's say Max ages out and, bam, I'm the leader. I don't know how I would do it better. In fact, I don't know that I would do it better than Mr. Bernier. I don't know what makes Pierre Poilievre resonate in a way that is a national movement, because it was a good campaign. People paid attention. A lot of people got energized by his rhetoric. People came out to see him in a way that I've never seen in Canadian politics. What makes that resonate? Because I don't think that you can buy that. I think that he did that. Mr. Poilievre did that. Okay, he created that. He created that buzz, and he took advantage of a situation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, can you create your own situations to take advantage of? To a degree, yes. I don't know what the missing piece is here. I wish I did. What is it? What do you think? Anyway, this is Maxime Bernier talking about going to Saskatoon to deal with the charges for non-crimes that he was levied while touring the country, opposing lockdowns, etc. And he got arrested, right? I don't know how you could do it better. I really don't. Maxime Bernier says, the trial in Saskatoon for 50 extraordinary Canadians who defied a tyrannical law against peaceful assembly will continue for the next 2 weeks. What a gigantic waste of money and resources when real criminals are at large. Gun crime alone, right? The resources being spent on this is just ridiculous. I agree. I'll play about a minute. Here we go.
Hello, everybody. I was in Saskatoon in the court yesterday with 50 amazing Canadians. We were there because in May 2021, we participated in a rally outside, a rally against the draconian COVID-19 measures. And, we were not alone. We had the visit of a lot of police over there. They were taking photos and videos of us. And now we are in the court, and that trial will be for the next 2 weeks. Imagine all the resources that the provincial government is spending for a non-crime, because the provincial government is saying in the court that, that rally was illegal because under the Province Health Emergency Act, you did not have the right to have a rally with more than 10 persons outside. That's ridiculous. And more important, that's again our Charter of Rights. And in a democratic country, you must have the right to protest against draconian measures. And that's what we did.
So there you go. Hopefully they have a good outcome. We'll see. Fingers crossed. There's no guarantee. Certainly, it seems like our courts are definitely stacked against people who are just fighting to be fighting for common sense. Really, that's the only thing I can. That's what it looks like to me. Lori Goldstein says RCMP says recording of disputed Lucki phone call did exist, but it's been deleted. Spokesperson says the RCMP are reviewing the situation. Oh, thank goodness. Are they investigating? I can't wait until the results of their investigation are made public. Like, how could this happen? Right? The incredulity. My goodness. You don't say. There was no backups? Oh, shucks. So our police force is garbage, right? Yeah. The National Police Force should probably be mothballed because it seems like they're the criminals. Jeepers creepers. I often remember and talk about the 90s and how Hell's Angels were made into the bad guys. And now I think it's the OPP and the RCMP. And I think that that's a sad state of affairs. Like they've taken over the role, if not the label. That's the word. This is interesting. I wrote a piece so I'm running for school board trustee, and I wrote a piece talking about how the Upper Grand District School Board will repeatedly, in all of their policy documents, every bit of policy they have put out says that they value all students and employees and families, regardless of age, ancestry, color, race, citizenship, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Their policy manuals say the same thing. They have inclusive, defined as inclusive processes, services, programs, and practices are accessible to and usable by as many people as possible, regardless of race, ethnic origin, blah, 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 race, gender, age, disability, all sorts of stuff. They say this stuff needs to be accessible to all, inclusive to all, belonging. Everybody must feel belonging and involvement. So it says processes and policies and services are accessible to and usable by as many people as possible. And the board is open, safe, equitable, and respectful, where everyone feels a sense of trust, belonging, and involvement. And then the superintendent, this is the superintendent of inclusivity and equity. Right? Great title. Isn't it great? He tweets this out on September 6th. He says, happy first day of school to all students, staff, and families. But here he's got an image that has a hashtag Black Excellence on it. And if everybody, like everybody excellence, all student excellence, that'd be fine. But Black excellence, that excludes a whole lot of people in the Upper Grand District School Board. And I thought that goes against their stated policies. The image here is in conflict with the statements of the tweet. It would be like a high school senior, let's say, or a teacher putting out a tweet that said one thing, everybody is welcome, but the flyer says, Black students only, or something to that effect. It excludes everybody. If that situation happened, that student or that teacher would be told, you're violating the policies and you need to change this. And I think that it's interesting because the superintendent of equity is supposed to be setting an example and isn't. And the words, the messaging of the tweet's text and the messaging of the image in the tweet are in conflict, and the conflict violates the policy. And I think that that's absolutely wild. And I go through in painstaking detail every policy document I can get my hands on and show how they're violating this. And I think that they realize what they're doing, and they're hoping that people are just going to be fearful and cower and not call this stuff out. But it needs to be called out. All students, regardless of the color of their skin or their race or ancestry or anything like that, should feel valued by the public school board everywhere. There shouldn't be any skin color blockades or anything to that effect within a school. And school boards shouldn't be sending divisive tweets because the adults influence the children. So if the adults are sending these divisive tweets, then they're teaching the kids to send divisive tweets. And I said, you need to include everybody. everybody in the messaging, all people. You can't say just black people should be excellent. You should say everybody is excellent. Everybody, all student achievement matters. You matter to me, not because of your skin color, dear student, but because you're here and learning, and our job is to teach you, not because of your skin color, but because we're teachers. So after I spoke to the board, this is the tweet he put out. Better, but still, we got work to do because the other tweet's still up. Why do they think divisive messaging is a good example to set for our kids? It's unbelievable. It's egregious. It's unreal. The second tweet says, pencil sharpens in their case, bells are ringing, let's make haste, schools beginning, dreams to chase, all are welcome here. It's International Literacy Day, enjoying a book he reads as a read aloud to kids for this new school year. And the image on the book says, all are welcome. And it's got kids of every color and adults of every color on the page. I understand what's happening here. That's okay. I get it. It's better messaging than this. Better, but it's not perfect. And we need to fix it. And we need to fix it for the kids. I don't care about me. I don't care about my feelings. It's not me that's being messaged racist messaging. It's not adults who are supposed to be role models for me that are putting this nonsense out. So we need to call this out. We need to make sure that the Upper Grand District School Board and the people who are representing and teaching our children are setting a good example, because that's not a good example. And here's another terrible example. GTA Schools says, Gord Perks, I see you've teamed up with Debbie. Do you agree that white kids in Toronto District School Board should be excluded from after-school basketball programs too? Here's the Parkdale after-school program. It says Coach Trey Allen and the Swansea Black Student Success Committee present after-school basketball. This program has been designed to provide an opportunity for grades 1 to 3 students who identify as Black, racialized, and or from marginalized communities to begin to develop their basketball skills under the supervision of an experienced TDSB coach. Why just Black kids? From grades 1 to 3? Get them young. Man, start that racism young. No, you can't come to the Black after-school basketball program because it's for Black kids and marginalized kids. So get out of here, you white kid. You probably have somewhere else to be, right? I don't get it. I don't get it. Why are we being discriminatory? Why don't we just let any kid who wants to access this program access this program? Is there a wait list? Get more teachers, right? Like, this kind of stuff is needlessly divisive. And I worked in schools. I worked in schools for 15 years. I've never seen this kind of divisive language. And the reality is, I could have probably written another 2,000 words talking about. There's another tweet that this guy sent out, and he sent it out and it linked to the Ontario government plan to tackle racism. Hold on, I'm going to go get it because I need to make this point. So here's the tweet. This is his Twitter timeline. Here's the tweet. And he's linking this Ontario anti-Black racism strategy. Of course, this is because I pushed back on this, right? And in this Government of Ontario package, it makes some pretty racist statements if you take them on their face. And I don't see any sources for this. And the thing that I have a problem with is Laith Marouf was paid by the federal government to produce content, anti-racism content, while he himself is an anti-Semite. So, okay, that is, if you pay for racist content and then cite that racist content to justify racist actions, I'm not okay with that. So what guarantees do I have that the provincial government didn't engage in exactly the same thing? And there was an example of them doing something like this, paying people for studies that they then base policy on, but I can't bring it to mind. But somebody mentioned it yesterday and I thought, oh, that's a good point. Regardless, he linked to this document. This document says Black children are more likely to be in foster care or enrolled in lower academic streams. Black men are more likely to interact with the justice system than their white counterparts at all levels of society. Black women are more likely than white women to be unemployed or underemployed despite having higher levels of education. 8.8% of Black women with university degrees are unemployed compared to 5.7% of white women with high school diplomas. They're not comparing the same cohorts. That's meaningless. That's like saying 12% of gymnasts go to college while only 8% of horseback riders go to high school. Like, screw off with your ridiculous comparisons that don't make any sense. The other part of this is this document talks about scalable initiatives and using data to drive your policies. My question is, what data is driving this policy? So this superintendent linking to this policy does nothing to bolster the argument that this is appropriate. All it does is make him look indignant. I don't know. Like he wants to lose an argument? I'm not sure exactly. But racism, especially towards our kids, is not okay, period. Alitha Raj is responding to Melissa Lantsman, and Melissa Lantsman says, I'm old enough to remember that the Prime Minister called an election and weaponized vaccines, calling everyone who disagrees with him racist and misogynist. And Alitha says, clarification, he didn't call everyone who disagrees with him a racist and a misogynist. He was talking about the aggressive protesters who showed during the campaign when he said these protesters are people who don't believe in science, who are often misogynistic, often racist as well. No, he was talking about anybody who disagreed with him, anybody who hadn't taken the vaccine that he wanted you to take, anybody who disagreed with him, that's who he was talking about. They're using this to make it uncomfortable to write pieces like I wrote. They're trying desperately to normalize this, to make it okay to do this, and to make it okay to do the grades 1 to 3 black only basketball while sowing division, while creating division on purpose. It is done with purpose. Jonathan Kay is responding. This is another school board thing. Rob Kalowski is an Ontario Ed trustee candidate in York region. And he says, I have a question or two about your platform. You mentioned a national anthem. Why do you feel it is important to play at the beginning of the school day? So they're trying to get under why playing O Canada is important. They're trying to remove that from the culture. And it's not an accident. It's on purpose, okay? Moving on a little bit, I was talking about King Charles, and somebody says, why won't you give him a chance? You're judging him by who he was as prince, and why can't you give King Charles a chance? Because he knows his role. Prince Charles knew his role too. Prince Charles knew that eventually he'd be the king, and the king is supposed to be apolitical, and so Prince Charles was super political. And here's a Bob Moran cartoon of Klaus Schwab riding King Charles with a World Economic Forum flag. And I think that's bang on accurate. I think, oh yeah, man, that's pretty true. And the reason that I'm not giving Checky a break is because I paid attention to who he was when he was the Prince of Wales, and he was on board with all of this stuff. Everybody was hoping. My mom was hoping. All the British people I know, which is my mom, are hoping that Charles would just kind of go retire. And the whole reason I was going to show this to you, and this is the Imperial March. So I'm not going to play the sound because I don't care if they ding me or whatever, but I just don't want a copyright strike. So they're doing an Imperial March, and they're coming in, and this is Camilla sitting on the Queen's throne. I said to my mom, did you ever think you'd see Camilla, Queen of England? Holy smokerodies. Anyway, the WEF king is taking his throne, and if you want to watch it to the Imperial March, that's where it is. Very interesting stuff. I didn't think Camilla would seat the throne, but hey man, I guess it is what it is. I think it won't last that long. How long could it possibly last? 25 years? He's 73, right? Oh, jeepers creep. I mean, it's old, but it's not old. Here is one more example of King Charles being exactly who I think he is. Here we go.
We have waved flags and some have shaken their fists and everything has gone on as before. Well, today we have seen people arrested for protesting against Charles III. One woman was led away for holding up a placard which read, "Not my king." This is frankly pathetic. A monarchy which can't survive some booing and a few pieces of cardboard is a pretty flimsy thing, isn't it? This kind of idiotic, heavy-handed policing is actually, longer term, dangerous for the monarchy. Because if the suggestion is that we can have a king or we can have free speech, then millions of us will say, oh, I think free speech, thanks.
Indeed, right? I do think free speech, thanks. We'll see. We'll see. All right, so the Queen's funeral is a federal holiday. Colin DeMello is reporting the federal government announced a national holiday to mark the Queen Elizabeth's death. We are still waiting on word from the Premier's office to see whether Ontario will follow suit. No, we won't. It's the day of mourning. Right. Andrew Lawton likes this. He says, this is the right move. The death of our sovereign is a rare event, once in a lifetime for many. It should be honored accordingly. Once in a lifetime? I want to live more than 25 more years. Holy smokeroonies. Charles, right? I mean, we could have a new king, right? More than once in a lifetime, Andrew. Rosemary Barton, of course, is saying Prime Minister confirms Monday will be a national holiday at the federal level. Right, sure. And here is Premier Ford. He says, Ontario will mark September 19th, the day of the Queen's funeral, as a provincial day of mourning in lieu of a provincial holiday, which is good for business. I think that's a good thing. And people will be, oh, have you seen the Queen's thing? And people will say, oh, yeah, whatever. It'll be over by the time we get up anyway. Like by noon, it's 5 p.m. in England. So like by 9 a.m., everything will be happening, right? CTV will be covering it, and teachers will have it on in the teacher's lounge. National Post says, a paid day off to mourn the Queen if you're a federal bureaucrat. You're welcome. So many tax dollars going for so much waste. Justin says, new from the BC government, all schools will be closed this Monday to mark the passing of the Queen. So that's all that I've got. 6 days notice, 5 days notice, no time notice to get your kids some care. But BC schools are closed for the Queen. That's pretty wild. During any day now, we are going to finish litigating the 2016 problems that were being discussed during the 2016 election. The stuff people thought Trump was going to deal with good and quick. Remember when they were talking about how Twitter could they could tweet as anybody and insert it wherever in the timeline? Here is a whistleblower, one of the Twitter engineers, talking about how Twitter engineers could tweet as anybody. So it's real. Here we go.
When you say Twitter engineers could tweet as anybody, tell me what that means.
That meant a Twitter engineer understanding how the running systems and the data flows were operating could then access and inject or put forward information as I mentioned in my oral statement, any of the senators sitting here today.
And have you ever seen that happen?
No, not directly.
Not directly. Are you concerned it has happened? Do you have some reason to believe it may have happened?
The number of cases that were reported to me by individual engineers saying, hey, we found this, I'm going to try and have somebody fix it, where that was the exact problem and we wouldn't know if it had happened in the past. Yes, I am concerned.
Wow.
So there you go. They could tweet as anybody. They could. I talk about biology a lot and how your biology, meaning if you're male or female, influences your outlook on life. Men prefer, and this is not an exclusive statement, just men like these stories more. There are women who like these stories exclusively, right? There are women who only like these stories, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But just as a general stroke, I'm not talking about you individually. Some people get upset about this kind of stuff. I don't know. But men like the hero journey story, the going out into the community, finding a piece of gold and then bringing it back, going out from your community, finding a piece of gold or treasure, and then bringing it back and sharing it with the community, whether that's knowledge or actual treasure or whatever. And women are usually more enthralled by the Beauty and the Beast story. So taming a smelly, awful man, right? And so the reason for that is, I think, obvious because, well, biology demands these things to be true. And so this person is a person being interviewed by Jordan Peterson. And I think the interview is worthwhile. I was watching it yesterday and I haven't finished it yet, so I don't know. But this woman talks about how it's easy for men to pretend that biology doesn't exist because they have not grown a human inside them. And if you have grown a human inside you, it is much more difficult to deny biology exists and makes a difference. Right? And I think that that's accurate. Okay. Here's just a really little clip of that. The longer clip is in the description, and I think on my locals, maybe not yet, but it will be. Here we go.
The reason that this battle is being fought on women's bodies particularly, because if you want to say that sex isn't real and what people say about themselves is real, like formally that's symmetric, that should affect everybody, but actually it affects women because women's bodies are more exigent than men's. So we're the ones who carry the babies, basically. And I think that means that a large share of all women hit the bedrock reality of this is how we make new human beings. And it's easier for men to ignore that fact, easier for men to think of themselves as a ghost in a machine, or as a little homunculus being carried around by a meat puppet, as someone who could become immortal, as someone who could, cut the fleshly bonds, or that, we could start doing womb transplants, all these things. Like, if you've had that experience of growing another human being and then having to get it out of you, you're just much less amenable, shall we say, to these sorts of illusions. And so here in Britain, one of the major sites of
So she's saying that there's a hard reality. There's a hard reality to the world that if somebody asks you, if somebody says, like, here's a hamburger, this is a mouse I'm holding in my hand, just for demonstrable purposes. But if you and I agree this is a hamburger, it's still not going to taste like a hamburger, and it's not going to sustain you like a hamburger, and your digestive system is not going to treat it like a hamburger. Even if you agree and I agree that this right here, this mouse right here, is a hamburger. Is it only a mouse because I say it's a mouse and I'm holding it? Or is it actually a hamburger because we both agree it's a hamburger, right? Agree with me really quick. It's a hamburger? It's a hamburger. It's still a mouse. Doesn't taste like a hamburger to me, right? So if reality can be denied and the proof of the proof of it can be kicked down the road, right? If you don't have to produce a baby, you can say you're a woman all day long. And no, producing a baby is not the end all and be all of being a woman. That's oversimplified, obviously. But for this example, right? There are other things I guess we could choose as well, but again, it's not exclusive. And being a woman is more complicated than that, but it's also much more complicated than just making the statement, I am a woman, right? Because what? That's not how reality works, right? This is not a hamburger. Objectively, it's not a hamburger. All right. And that's enough out of me, right? Usually I wrap up the whole political stuff, but there's so many things in motion at this point in time. The media's attacks, the attacks by the government with inflationary spending, despite the warnings from the bank, there's so many things in motion. The collapse of the tourism industry through bad policy. It's hard to make an accurate prediction, because if I were to predict, I would say that people will try and save themselves from a catastrophic collapse. But it seems like the catastrophic collapse would feed on itself and you wouldn't be able to save yourself. You wouldn't be able to say, well, let's scrap these crap policies, because, I mean, it's not like Trudeau's going to listen to you, right? They're trying to say that now and they're not listening. They're trying to say, stop borrowing money and spending it, not listening. And so how do you save yourself from a tailspin if the tailspin is self-imposed and the people who started the tailspin won't let go of the cockpit controls? So there's a lot in flux. There's a lot in motion. And it seems like, remember that plane that they kept telling us that we have to jump out of and they'll build one on the way down? They just decided, F it, we're going to crash it. And we're all on board. And it doesn't seem like there's any kind of parachutes. And if you mention that plane that they promised to build, you just get angry looks. So that's enough out of me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out Speaking Moistly. Greg and I talk again yet, and it was a great one. And I really enjoyed speaking with Greg, and I'm really looking forward to the next Kitchen Table Talks. I'm going to commit. Let's do Sunday. Looking forward to seeing everybody. 1 p.m. I hope that I'm not forgetting something. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. Should be all good. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.